Hello everyone. So today begins the lesson on congruent triangles. Now we've heard the word congruent in the past as applied to sides and angles. Now we're going to apply it to shapes. So congruent triangles are triangles with the same in layman's terms shape. Whoa. Sorry, I have it left over for previous settings. Here we go. Same shape and the same size in like the most basic terms we can think of. What this means mathematically is that all the corresponding parts of the triangle, and triangles are made up of angles and sides, so all the corresponding angles and sides of a triangle are congruent, or all the corresponding parts of a triangle are congruent. And when we make congruency statements, they look like this. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Now, the placing of the letters in each statement does matter. If we notice, A is the angle with the 1 mark. That is the first letter over there. The angle with the 1 mark is D over here, and that's the first one over here. B is the angle with 2 marks. That matches up with the angle with 2 marks, E, on the second triangle. And finally, C has 3 marks on it. And that lets you know it matches up with F, which has 3 marks. And of course, those markings are ways to tell which angles are congruent with each other. So we know F is congruent to C, B is congruent with E, and A is congruent with D. Another way we could possibly think about it is like, let's say it didn't give us any information about the angles. Well, if we went from A to B to C, that means we went across the 1 tick mark side, then the 2 tick mark side. The matching way to do that would be to go from D to E, 1 tick mark, and then from E to F, 2 tick mark side. So just try to match up the letters. There's other ways we could write this. For example, triangle, let's say CAB. That would be congruent with triangle. Well, C matches up with F. A matches up with D. And B matches up with E. So we could have written that triangle CAB is congruent to triangle FDE. And, there's other combinations we could have worked with as well. The most important part, arguably, of knowing that triangles are congruent is what's called Cpctc. This stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Now that might sound like a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. But if you break it down word by word, it sort of makes logical sense. By the definition, the corresponding parts, meaning the angles or sides that match up with each other, the corresponding parts of congruent triangles that have the same shape and size, are themselves congruent. So the corresponding parts will be congruent with each other. Basically, if we know 2 triangles are congruent, then we know that every pair of corresponding parts is also congruent. So, what does this look like in action? Well, for our first problem, we have triangle JKL, and that's congruent to triangle PQR. And if we're given that statement, without even having to draw a triangle or look at anything, we can tell much information about the triangle already. For example, I can tell that angle J is congruent with the angle P. Why? Because they're each the first letter of their respective statement. And it's like that easy. So angle K, right? That's in the middle of the first triangle. That must be congruent to the middle letter of the other triangle, Q. So those two angles are congruent. And angle L is congruent with angle R. So just by the naming convention alone, this is why we name them in the precise order, we are able to tell so much information about this triangle. Now, for example, the sides. Well, sides are always 2 points. So, like, for example, the first two letters in the first triangle are JK. That would be one side of the triangle. That must be congruent with PQ, because those are the first two letters of the other one. The last two letters, KL, must be congruent with the last two letters of the other one, so QR. And I know I keep saying congruent with the letters. It means those sides are congruent. Again, without even looking at the problem, without looking at the triangles themselves, you already know which sides are going to be congruent with each other, which parts correspond, and therefore which parts are congruent. And then finally, we have the side JL, the first and third letter, is congruent with the side PR. And then another valid congruency statement, aside from what we have, I could say that triangle KLJ is congruent with triangle K matches up with Q, L matches up with R, and J matches up with P. That could be another valid congruency statement. Same thing with problem 2. If it tells us triangle WXY is congruent with EFG, we can get all sorts of information. So angle W is congruent with angle E. Angle X is congruent with angle F. And angle Y is congruent with angle G. For the sides, you have that the side WX would be congruent with EF. XY would be congruent with FG. And WY is congruent with EG. Another valid congruency statement, well, let's do triangle YWX. That's going to be congruent. Well, Y matches up with the G, so triangle G. W matches up with E. And X matches up with F. So triangle YWX matches with triangle GEF. And then finally, part 3, given that triangle KPM is congruent to AYC, complete each of the following statements. So now we're even given the fact that we can see the triangles, but we don't even really need that, but it will help us get some intuition about what's going on. So for instance, side KM, what's that congruent with? Well, KM is the first and the third letter. So in the second one, the first and third letter is AC. And we can notice, all right, KM is this large side here, and AC is the largest side on the other one. So those two sides are congruent. Then we have CY. CY, which is the last two letters, would match up with the other last two letters on the first triangle, which is PM. Or I should say, really should say MP. So CY is congruent with PM or MP. Okay, PK. P and K are the first two letters. So the first two letters on the other one would be YA. So we have that YA is congruent with KP or PK. Angle Y, the middle letter, matches with angle P. So I know that those two angles are the same, Y and P. Angle K is the first letter, that's going to match with angle A. So we got K and A. Angle ACY. So that's A to C to Y. C is the vertex. Well, looking at, we have A to C to Y. On our congruency statement, so like the first to the third to the second, that means it would be KMP. So angle KMP. A to C to Y. That would be, notice the A is the two tick marks. We go to K, then to the blank tick mark, then to the one tick mark. And we have that those angles are congruent as well. Then it says triangle MPK. Well, M is the third letter. Then we have P and then K. So it's kind of like the order here, just reversed. So I'm just going to reverse the other triangle and get CYA. Then triangle YAC is the second to the first to the third letter. To match up with that, it would be the second letter P, first letter K, last letter M. So triangle PKM. And that is the very basics of triangle congruence. In the next videos, we'll see how we can obtain some more information using these facts.